This is a public health announcement. Brought to you by Heather Shepard.
The Primal Pioneer. Live an outdoor life.
This is the Primal Pioneer podcast, a show dedicated to helping you achieve optimal health by making radical lifestyle, dietary, and environmental shifts to support forward movement with your health. I'm your host, Heather Shepard, radical health practitioner, gut health specialist, and homeopathic doctor in training. When I was 23 years old, I suffered a TBI, otherwise known as a traumatic brain injury. This shifted my life from being a super athletic type A kind of person to being completely sidelined from physical activity for nearly 12 years. During that time, I tried every modality under the sun, desperately yearning, trying, and hoping to get better. It wasn't until I stepped outside of the conventional medical model and even much of the alternative medical model that I saw real lasting progress with my health. Today, I help thousands of people overcome both acute and chronic health ailments using my nature and science-based radical approach to health, which targets the most important yet most overlooked aspects of health and wellness. During today's episode, I talk all about root causes of constipation. Literally millions of people worldwide struggle with chronic constipation, and both the alternative and allopathic world have general suggestions regarding how to become more regular, but most of these suggestions never actually improve bowel movement regularity in the long run. During this episode, I go into full detail as to why the common suggestions such as eat more veggies, eat more fiber, increase water intake, and move more typically fail the individual struggling with chronic constipation. And I reveal my top 5 root causes of constipation to help you approach this condition from a radical health perspective. Get your notepad out because this episode is chock full of radical health tips and holistic health insights regarding overcoming constipation, improving gut health, and accessing root causes of our modern health ailments. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show today. Today, I want to talk with you all about overcoming chronic constipation. So if you, a loved one, somebody you know, struggles with chronic constipation, the hope is that this episode will help you get to root causes that you likely aren't yet addressing to help you overcome sluggish bowel. So our standard approach to constipation is eat more fiber, get more fruits and veggies into your diet, and maybe add a magnesium supplement. And if that doesn't work, then add in things like senna tea or Metamucil, fiber supplements, and in desperate times, head over to the convenience store and get some milk of magnesia. And then if all else fails, get into doing enemas. So that's like the standard approach to overcoming constipation. Those are our standard recommendations. And everybody in both the conventional and the alternative health world relies on these suggestions. We can also add in there, get more movement and drink more water, right? Because these are the basic recommendations that were given to address chronic constipation states and to help us maintain regularity. So if you're somebody, however, who struggles with chronic constipation, you likely have tried all of these things and still struggle with chronic constipation. So I want to dissolve a few myths here for you all before we dive into the bulk of the episode. And some of those myths are, if you're constipated chronically, then eat more fiber, okay? If you struggle with chronic constipation, you likely get very frustrated when people say eat more fiber or eat more fruits and vegetables because you likely already do this. And so if we're talking about chronic constipation states in relatively healthy people, okay, so what do I mean by relatively healthy? In this case, I'm particularly referring to the diet. So you don't eat McDonald's, you don't eat fast food, You're not eating a bunch of processed junk. You're not eating like birthday cake from Safeway, etc., right? You're not eating junk. You eat a relatively healthy diet, yet you still struggle with constipation. You do all the right things dietarily that both conventional and alternative medical individuals, professionals tell you to do. Get your fiber in through your fruits, your veggies, your legumes, right? And most people who struggle with chronic constipation do this and with no relief. Okay, this doesn't help. And it's simply because this isn't why healthy people, and again, that's healthy people meaning those who consume a relatively healthy diet, it's not the root of their issue. It might be the root of somebody's issue if they eat a really poor diet, okay? But typically, and I'm referring to most of the clients that I see who come to my practice with chronic constipation, they're relatively healthy people eating already a pretty healthy diet. And so they're frustrated. They're frustrated because they've tried adding in cruciferous veggies and, fibrous foods, etc. And it's all organic and they're spending a lot of money on it and time preparing it, and they're still constipated. This is because this is not the driving cause in most of the cases, especially in relatively healthy people, of chronic constipation. So I want to dissolve that myth. If you're already doing that, no, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just not getting to the root of the issue, because just simply eating more veggies and fruits and fiber isn't going to get to the heart of chronic constipation issues. Also, drinking more water. So you can actually drink too much water. A lot of people are obsessed with drinking more water today. And of course, you want to get really clean, pure, good quality spring water into your diet. You want to be drinking this on a daily basis, right? Most people are drinking enough water. However, they still struggle with constipation. And sometimes we can actually drink too much water where we're just running to the bathroom all day and we're constantly having to pee during the day, during the night. And this can be depleting of certain minerals in your body. You can just urinate them out. So the simple recommendation of drink more water, well, we want to be careful with that one, because we don't want people to get into this pathological state around their water drinking, which many people are today. And without even realizing it, they just think they need to be drinking more water, so they'll kind of force it down, or they'll aim for a certain amount of water intake throughout their day. And it can be on the high end. Unless you are thirsty, you shouldn't really be drinking, because here's the thing about that. If you're not thirsty and you're drinking, you're going to cover up a symptom. So, for example, let's say you're not thirsty, but you know you have to drink water because it's good for you. And so you start chugging water, you start drinking more water throughout the day. And we want to pay attention to this. And this might sound a little outside of the box, which is why I'm a radical health practitioner, because I look at pretty much all things health related outside of the box. Because what we're being told about most things about our health is absolute nonsense, and it's really not helpful. Water intake can be one of those. So let's say you're not thirsty, but you drink water, and you go to have an intake with a doctor or a healthcare professional who asks you, how's your water intake? And you tell them, good, I drink water all the time. But let's say, like, for example, in my practice, when I ask my clients, hey, how's your water intake? They say, good, but I make myself drink because I know I have to. I know it's good for me, but, I really have to remind myself. That tells me that the client actually doesn't have a big thirst. And that's a symptom that we want to pay attention to. Okay, so of course, drinking water is a good thing, and we want to drink healthy amounts of water. And I know I went kind of on an aside here with the constipation, but you really want to pay attention to your body's symptoms. And when you get the right practitioner who can help you examine your symptoms to give you an accurate protocol to get to the root of your health issues, if you are somebody, just for example, who's not thirsty, but you drink a lot of water because you have to, and then you tell your healthcare practitioner, I drink a lot of water, I'm fine, my water intake is really good, that could mask an underlying symptom. So I'm not telling you not to drink water at all, but just to pay attention to your symptoms so that when you do work with, say, a naturopath or a homeopath or, someone in the alternative world, you can accurately portray your symptoms to them. So people who struggle with chronic constipation, sometimes it's about water, but usually if it's a chronic state, it's not that you're not drinking enough water every day of your life for the past 10 years, right? There's some underlying constitutional issue at play driving the constipation. Now, if you drink more water and you start having bowel movements, then we can say, hey, I guess you weren't drinking enough water and that's awesome. Keep it up and let's see if the regularity maintains itself. Because if you do something and then you have success in the short term and the long term, that's a really good indication that that was a good practice for you, that helped correct some root imbalance, right? But if you have success in the short term, but not in the long term, that means you did not get to the root of the issue, right? Or that simply another layer has presented that needs to be addressed. Or if you start to drink more water and you don't realize any change in your bowels, then that is also an indication that, hey, drinking more water might not be the best suggestion for you and to help you overcome your chronic constipation. So one other thing that I'll mention here is around movement, because another standard recommendation is to go out, exercise, get more movement. And yes, we tend to be very sedentary. We tend to not get near as much movement as, say, our ancient ancestors who basically lived outdoor lives. They were working in the fields. They were outdoors moving sticks and planting gardens and chopping wood and carrying water from one place to the next and etc. And this is not what our modern day lifestyles are like. Our kids are going to school on Zoom. We're working from Zoom. Everything revolves around an indoor lifestyle. And we really have to make an effort today to go outside of that standard approach to life that we've come to just call and consider normalcy. However, most people aren't moving enough. When it comes to chronic constipation, let's say you start a walking routine and you go for a walk every day and you're still constipated, then we can say movement likely isn't your root cause of chronic constipation. Now, movement, of course, is amazing and really beneficial, and we all need to move more. However, just looking at this from a chronic constipation state, if that doesn't help you, we can, likely accurately say that's not your root cause of chronic constipation. So let's start with ruling out the obvious culprits, right, when it comes to chronic constipation. So today I'm going to cover 5 root causes of chronic constipation and why our standard approach to constipation really basically isn't working. It's failing millions of people struggling with sluggish bowel. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have new radical health tools to help you overcome root causes of your constipation struggles. And hopefully this will really, really help you to see and approach sluggish bowel with much more insight. So let's start with number 1, just by ruling out the obvious culprits. So what I mean by this is if you struggle with chronic constipation, these are some of the most obvious causes of chronic constipation that can be overlooked, by some people. So let's take a look here and you can just kind of cross these off and say, nope, that's not me, or yes, that's me, and I should look at that more, right? So in this category, we have prescription drugs. So there's a lot of prescription drugs that can really cause chronic constipation states. if you've been on a prescription drug for long term, for any amount of time, ask yourself, did my constipation start before I started taking this drug or, during or after I started taking this drug? That will give you a lot of insight there. And if you're like, hey, well, I guess my constipation did start when I started taking this drug, then, it could be a good idea to take a look at the condition you're taking the prescription for. Do you really need to take the prescription for it? Are there other things you can consider? Will your medical doctor work with you to wean off of that drug and make maybe some healthier choices with regard to how you can approach whatever condition you're taking the prescription for? I understand that not everyone can go off their prescription drugs, so that can be a very specialized case to talk with your doctor about. Another cause in this category are iron supplements. So if you are taking any type of iron supplement and you're constipated, there can be a real correlation here. Talked about water intake and how to gauge that. If you're not drinking enough water, try it out. Again, you want to make sure you're drinking when you're thirsty. And if you're not drinking while you're thirsty, pay attention to that and like, I'm never thirsty. I don't really want to drink water. I feel thirstless. And maybe I should talk to someone about that, because if somebody comes into my practice and they say they're thirstless, that's a really, really insightful symptom that they just shared with me that can help me lead to get them the right remedy and protocol to help them overcome that. And also, I talked briefly about movement. So if you're someone who's sedentary, like, here's an example for myself. When I first started my online business, oh man, when was this? 10 years ago or so. I was sitting a lot. I wasn't moving a lot. I was sitting, and I noticed that I did have more of a sluggish bowel when I was first starting my online business. And so I did all of the standard things. I drank more water, ate more fiber, fruits and vegetables, all that. Nothing helped. So, of course, then I added more movement into my life. And now I do what's called standing desk, where my desk is literally, I've made it this area where I can stand at my desk. And so I'm not constantly sitting. And so I can kind of move my body while I am writing or say, recording a podcast like this. And I'm not totally sitting and sedentary. Kelly Starrett, he's a really cool dude. I like him. He's kind of a CrossFit guy, but he's very alternative, very outside of the box. I love what he's doing because he incorporates a lot of stretching into his protocols. And it's not just your ordinary stretching where bend down, touch your toes and count to 10. These are very dynamic stretches that include breath work and certain breath holds into the stretches to help you overcome sore hamstrings or a stiff back or shin splints, you name it, whatever you have, right? But what I like about this guy is his alternative approach to movement. He's very wise, very smart guy. If you're into this sort of thing, if you're into movement, I would highly recommend checking him out. He's super popular. You may have heard of him, but what I'm bringing this up is because he wrote a book called, I believe it's called Desk Bound, something like that. But he goes into really, really good detail in that book about how sitting in a sedentary lifestyle is basically like secondhand smoke for modern day people, right? We know smoking is not bad, but now we're working online, we're doing the Zoom thing, etc. And he's shown all these studies and correlations to really how bad it is for our health to be sitting all day. And so whether you struggle with chronic constipation or not, that's a really good book to check out. And again, if you're not moving enough, his site could help you because he's got some really great information, stretches and videos. But really, if you want to get really simple, the best form of exercise for all of us is walking. So try walking more. If this doesn't relieve your constipation, then we got to look at some deeper root issues, which takes us to number 2. These are not so known causes. And you'll see the closer I get to 5, there'll be the less and less quote unquote known causes of constipation. So number 2, these are not as widely known. Meal timing is one of them. You all who've been following me for some time know I talk a lot about meal timing, the importance of meal timing, especially with regard to hormone health, metabolic health, resetting the hormones, resetting the metabolism. And when it comes to chronic constipation, we want to take a look at least one area is the timing of your meals. So are you skipping breakfast? Are you a grazer? Do you like to eat small, frequent meals? And so we want to take a look at your meal timing. If you're not eating in a timely manner throughout the day, this could really contribute to chronic constipation states. Because I'll just take breakfast, for example. If you skip breakfast, and a lot of people are doing it today because they're told to intermittent fast through breakfast, that it, stimulates autophagy, that it helps to reset the metabolism and get one into a state of nutritional ketosis. Really, really looks good on paper. But let's be real, most people are not in a state to intermittent fast, especially through breakfast. Our modern culture, our bodies are not designed to do that. I should rephrase that, because our bodies in a way might be designed to do that, but because of our modern lifestyles, we've created a faulty metabolic signaling and just a faulty metabolic and hormonal system in our body that skipping breakfast is like adding kerosene to, a wildfire that's coming along. So this typically isn't a really good idea to skip breakfast. And if we take a look at breakfast from a metabolic standpoint, this is a meal that we don't actually want to fast through or skip, because it jumpstarts the metabolism, the hormone release, the cortisol release. It presses pause on melatonin release, right? Especially when we eat breakfast and simultaneously are getting our Sunlight RX on, watching the sunrise. This is what really starts to trigger and stimulate and jumpstart the metabolism, the digestion, the bowels, etc. Okay? So we want to take a look at meal timing. Is this a core issue of your chronic constipation? We also want to look at sunlight. So sunlight's a big deal when it comes to chronic constipation. If you're living an indoor life, you're going to be inundated with artificial light, predominantly of the blue spectrum. And this is another cause of chronic constipation that most people are unaware of. But I'll start with sunlight here because there's some very, very interesting dynamic things that happen with our gut health, our gut microbiome, our bowel movements, simply when we're in sunlight. So those of you who know the Sunlight RX, if you don't, hop over to my site, heathershepard.com, scroll down the homepage, you'll see a link there to purchase the Sunlight RX ebook, and you can start practicing the Sunlight RX to help improve things like digestive health. I even have a whole section in the ebook about using sunlight to improve digestive health. So one thing around sunlight and its impact on our digestive health is that UVA light stimulates neurotransmitters that we rely on, that we need to induce peristalsis. So, right, that movement, those tiny little movements that propel the food down the tract, form it into a stool, and that is dopamine, serotonin, and to a lesser extent, melatonin. All of these things are stimulated when your eyes and your skin are in UVA light. If you're living an indoor life, you're not going to be getting that stimulation. And if you're not getting that stimulation, you're not getting the chemical signals needed to effectively induce the peristalsis to move the food down the tract. And these are core neurotransmitters and melatonin, the hormone, to help make this possible. So if you're someone who struggles with chronic constipation, you've tried all the standard approaches, my next suggestion for you would be, okay, get your sunlight RX on. You're going to be getting the neurotransmitters, melatonin that help actually produce peristalsis, improve peristalsis to help you have more timely bowel movements, because really our bowels are a reflection of our circadian biology, right? Our body's physiological time clock. So if you struggle with slow digestion, we can say in one sense on the physical level that there's some kind of a circadian mismatch in the gut, within the gut. And so we know that circadian mismatch, and what that means is your body's physiological time clock is not in alignment with nature's time clock. And so to really have healthy circadian rhythms, circadian biology, which is huge with regard to overcoming and preventing metabolic disorders and hormonal imbalances, we need to align our physiological time clock with that of nature's. And one way, the key way, the main way we do that is by sunlight exposure throughout the day. So the timing of your bowel movements says a lot about the state of your circadian biology. So if you're not getting your sunlight RX on, and if you spend a lot of time inside, online, around artificial light, and you're not protected under that light, then especially then you're going to struggle with some bowel issues, and chronic constipation is one that comes up. I had an interesting case, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, where a teenager, he had just graduated high school. He was getting ready to go to college, and he was having some major bowel issues. He wasn't going to the bathroom, and when he did, it was this diarrhea state induced by laxatives. And so, when we were doing the intake, I asked, tell me a little bit about your life. What do you do? And this kid was a gamer. So he would spend all night literally in front of a screen playing his video games. And then he would sleep during the day, wake up and go back to the video games. And I said, dude, if you want to really kick this thing, you've got to change this habit, this lifestyle, because it's fueling your leaky gut issues, your constipation issues. And he wouldn't do it. He said, I can't do it. I can't change that. And I said, you know what? I totally understand. When you're ready to change, feel free to give me a call. But this is a really huge thing that is really overlooked today with regard to not only chronic constipation, but poor gut health in general, is when we're looking at the wrong kind of light, the chemical messengers, the chemical signals that stimulate things like peristalsis, that stimulate and regulate, I should say, our circadian biology, these things can't occur when we're living under artificial light. And this is one major reason why all chronic diseases, metabolic diseases, hormonal diseases just continue to escalate since the invention of the light bulb by Edison. And then Westinghouse brought in the AC power grid. And then these trendy things that help to make our lives more modern, more convenient. We got the light bulb, electricity. Now we have cell phones. Now we have cell towers. Now we have Wi-Fi. Now we have 5G satellites on the planet and in the sky. You see, our reliance on these things are literally what is continuing to fuel poor health and our indoor lifestyles. And if you're as rebellious as me, you'll say, forget that. I'm not going to adhere to that system. I'm going to make a different life for myself. I'm going to find ways to be connected, to make a living, to share my passions with the world. And I'm also going to make it a priority to also get outside and lead a different life. So I wanted to mention those key things: meal timing, sunlight, blue light exposure, and also throw in stress there, because if we're super stressed out, if we're always in this state of fight or flight, we're either going to be in this state of diarrhea with our bowels, constipation with our bowels, or IBS with our bowels. And when we're stressed, our dopamine, serotonin, those things are just getting totally shot. Our melatonin's not going to be getting recycled. And we're going to be going into a state of flatlining our hormones because we're just going to completely wear out our cortisol levels. So that is what I have for number 2. You can see that under all these numbers, there's several different components. So I wanted to give you all the full scoop here. I couldn't just say one thing because I'd be selling you short. There's so many bases to cover here, especially with chronic constipation. If you're ready to prevent or overcome a metabolic and hormonal health-related struggle, including accessing root causes of chronic constipation states, you're in luck. Now, for the first time, a truly holistic and integrative approach to health is available to you. Late this November 2020, I'll be launching the Metabolic Reset Program, a program that incorporates diet, sunlight, and seasonal eating into the metabolic and hormonal health protocol. After witnessing the continued health successes with myself, my loved ones, and my clients, I'm ready to offer this truly health transformative program to you all. If you're ready to finally get to the root of your metabolic health struggles, your hormonal health struggles, you can get started right now. Head over to my site, heathershepherd.com, click on the Courses tab to reserve your spot in the Metabolic Reset Program that I'll be launching later this November 2020. I can't wait to help you get to the root of your metabolic and hormonal health struggles so you can begin to experience long-lasting health success as a result. Now, let's head back to the episode. Let's get into number 3. All right, number 3. Ooh, this is an interesting one. Epstein-Barr Virus, mono, which is kind of the same thing because you can have mono or you can have Epstein-Barr virus, but mono is also Epstein-Barr virus. So what I'm saying is you don't have to have mono to have Epstein-Barr virus. You can have Epstein-Barr virus outside of mono, but mono is also Epstein-Barr virus. Antibiotics, chemo, and radiation. That's what I have for number 3. So Epstein-Barr virus. This is kind of a thing that a lot of people are aware of today. This is a really common, more common than people know, this more common than COVID, in fact. Shocker. But Epstein-Barr virus, a lot of people struggle with Epstein-Barr virus, and oftentimes it's in the latent state, so they don't actually know they have Epstein-Barr. You could have Epstein-Barr and not know it. It could be diagnosed as something else. It could be diagnosed as fibromyalgia. It could be diagnosed as Lyme. It could be diagnosed as the flu. It could be diagnosed as mono. So Epstein-Barr can look a lot of different ways. And so usually if you've been exposed to Epstein-Barr and let's say you have a sunlight deficiency, you don't go outside that much, your immune system isn't super strong, that virus can stay latent in your body and can cause chronic constipation. There are a lot of reasons for this, one of which is, first of all, to even be susceptible to mono and Epstein-Barr virus, you have to have a sunlight deficiency and you have to have a vitamin D deficiency. If you're getting enough sunlight and you're exposed to Epstein-Barr, you might not even express symptoms. This is kind of like the Hadza tribe living in Tanzania, and they basically drink out of these water holes that have baboon poop in it. And if an American or even European went over there and drank out of that, they'd be in the hospital for days with E. coli and all sorts of other issues. But they drink out of those. Do they have any side effects? No, they don't. Why? They live outside. They're grounded. They don't wear shoes. They wear loins over their reproductive area. They're totally exposed to the sun, and they live on the equator. So they're getting blasted with UV light 365 days a year. So what I'm correlating this to in a weird way is that if your sunlight exposure is really adequate and your vitamin D levels in turn are adequate as well, even if you come in contact with Epstein-Barr, you likely will not get Epstein-Barr, okay? That can be said for a lot of other things, like for example, the Hadza and the E. coli thing. If your immune system is strong, and if you're in strong sunlight and your vitamin D from sunlight exposure is high, not from a pill, but from sunlight, your immune system will be basically this badass of an arsenal, right? It'll be really powerful and potent. So when you come in contact with a toxin, with a virus, with a bacteria, with COVID, etc., your body will basically be able to either A, fight it off, or it won't even enter because your immune system will be like Fort Knox and will just keep it out. So it'll basically just be so strong that it won't be able to penetrate and cause any harm to your body. So Epstein-Barr can cause constipation, however. If you have Epstein-Barr or mono, or you've had this in the past, I have seen this lead to chronic constipation states, even in people who had Epstein-Barr when they were 10, or mono when they were 12, or mono when they were 16 or 21, and now they're 40, now they're 50, now they're 60, and they've been constipated for years. I said, just every time I have a chronic constipation case come in, I said, have you ever had Epstein-Barr or mono? 90+% of the time in chronic constipation states, they say, yes, I have. I've had mono, I've had Epstein-Barr, and there's a really, really big connection here. So keep that in mind if you struggle with chronic constipation. Antibiotics, no matter if you are on antibiotics currently, you were 10 days ago, or you were 10 years ago, these still, yes, today can be playing a role in chronic constipation, okay? They not only alter the gut microbiome, but something that's even more, how do I want to say this? Something that it impacts even more, antibiotics, that we're not really told, is its impact on our mitochondria, right? And the mitochondria, this is our energy warehouse. It's our battery. It's our energy output. It's like our potential energy. Okay. How healthy our mitochondria are. If we have healthy mitochondria in a lot of numbers, meaning thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of mitochondria, we're going to be able to pump out a lot of energy and have a lot of energy throughout our day. Antibiotics, they target and kill bacteria. So you take an antibiotic for, let's say, some kind of bacterial infection, that it will wipe out some, not all, some of that bacterial infection. But what else do we know that's a bacteria in our body is a mitochondria. So if you take an antibiotic, that antibiotic is going to wipe out your mitochondria as well. So frequently, after I have somebody take antibiotics, they call me, Heather, I'm still not feeling well. I just got off of antibiotics for C. diff. I feel worse. I just stopped taking the antibiotics. Why do I feel worse? And this is, 10 days later, 2 weeks later. I had an older, I shouldn't say older, it's around my dad's age, somebody in their 60s, right? They said, Heather, they came to me with poor energy levels. They're really struggling with energy levels. And it was a significant decrease over the last 4 months. And I said, well, what happened around that time before your energy levels, were going down south? And they said, well, I took an antibiotic because I had an infection in my hand. And they told me the antibiotics they were on, and they were really strong. And I said, okay, so this individual's health, it was not in a really good place. Okay. And so this antibiotic that they took, really strong, a couple different rounds, really wiped out their mitochondria. And at that age, as you get older and older, and you have to rely on antibiotics, who cares about your gut microbiome at that point? I'm very concerned for your energy production needs and requirements, because we really need to preserve that as we age. And antibiotics will totally wipe out the mitochondria. You wipe out the mitochondria, especially in the gut, because those antibiotics will go in the gut. They'll compromise the mitochondria in the gut. What happens? You get chronically constipated and chronic fatigue. So if you've used antibiotics and you notice a correlation, especially since the last time I took antibiotics, I've struggled with chronic constipation. Okay, there's a red flag. Also, if you've undergone chemo or radiation, these are very, very dehydrating. They have very, very dehydrating effects on the cells, on the body. They literally pull water out of the cell. They dehydrate the cell. Any nutrients around the cell that keeps the cell electrified, energized, it's basically pulled from the cell and dehydrated in chemo and radiation. So if you've noticed constipation since chemo or radiation, then we need to get to some root causes there, because that's a really, really common one I see in my practice is people reporting chronic constipation since chemo and or radiation. And so we need to build the negative charge around the cell back up in order to overcome that root cause of constipation. Okay, so that's all. That was a big one. That was number 3. Okay, number 4. And again, we're getting less and less obvious. So if you go to your medical doctor, even, some naturopaths or some functional medicine doctors, the more we're getting down in this list here, the less obvious these are to the general public. So if you haven't considered these areas in chronic constipation, this is why I'm bringing these areas up, because I want to bring more attention to this topic. And I really want you to know that it's not just about fruits, vegetables, fiber, magnesium, water, and coffee enemas, okay? So we're really, these are going to help you get to more of the root cause of chronic constipation states. So let's talk about number 4, gallbladder removal, tonsillectomies, appendectomies, or removal of your appendix. These 3 surgeries are considered very standard surgeries, right? Harmless, standard. Your gallbladder hurts, take it out. You've had strep throat more than once, take out the tonsils, right? You've got a pain in your appendix, take it out. Okay, and let's not downplay it here. If somebody's having an appendicitis attack, then you want to, that could be a life-threatening thing. However, we have to look to other things also, because in homeopathy, there's a lot of different remedies for appendicitis. And in 70% of appendicitis cases, if we look to bryonia, that is a very, very good remedy for appendicitis. But the mainstream, they don't look at this. Every single emergency room should have bryonia in there for people who come in with appendectomies. And because if bryonia works for over 70% of appendicitis attacks and cases, why wouldn't you include this in? Because you can't make, a lot of money off of it? Literally. This is one of the most common, useful remedies for approaching appendicitis. But we are quick to just take the appendix out without trying anything else first. If you're having an appendicitis attack, I can't encourage you enough to immediately, even at the beginning stages, if you just think you're getting an appendicitis attack, reach out to a well-trained homeopathic doctor, because in many cases, when they know what they're doing, you can likely overcome appendicitis. Now, will that happen in all cases? No, there's some cases where you might actually need to go through with the procedure, and that surgery is there for when we need it. However, there's also other things to look at to help overcome appendicitis. Why is this a big deal? Because your appendix is an extension of your colon, okay? And it's also a major part of your immune system. It's very, very necessary for filtering out toxins, poisons, and keeping them from entering the bloodstream. The appendix is a very important organ, okay? So with regard to immune function, bowel health, we want to keep the appendix in if we can. We also want to keep the tonsils in. The tonsils are a very, very important immune system, immune regulating organ. I'm sure there's other things about the tonsils that are exceptionally important. One of them is its direct impact on bowel health. There have been studies and studies and studies showing that tonsillectomies, appendectomies, when we do these 2 procedures, the incidence of IBD or irritable bowel disease drastically rises. So these two organs might not look like they have anything to do with the digestion, but they are very, very tied in to the digestion. And we can see that, maybe most clearly in Chinese medicine when we look at the meridians and how those meridians connect to the digestive related meridians. So we don't want to just be quick to remove these things. There are things you can try before going to drastic measures, okay? Of course, if your appendix is about to explode, please go to the emergency room and you have to use your best judgment. I'm not giving you medical advice here, but what I am suggesting is that one, these two organs are very, very important, crucial aspects to the immune system and to the digestive system, which is really interesting because we know over 80% of the immune system is impacted and located in the gut. So if you struggle with chronic constipation and you've had your tonsils removed or your appendix removed, this could be a cause, an initial cause as to why a trigger which caused constipation. And so we really need to work on improving these areas of your health. And how can you do that? The question might be, well, I have my tonsils removed and you want me to improve my area of health and my tonsils, but how can I do that if I have my tonsils removed? It's a good question. It's totally, totally logical. And the answer would be, we have to look at your presenting symptoms. So let's say you've had your tonsils removed and now you have dry mouth. Now you have sinus infections. Now you have chronic constipation. Now you have anxiety, right? We have to take the whole picture into account. And when we treat the whole picture using something like homeopathy, diet, sunlight, then we can start to get to some root causes there and hopefully get you to a place where even though your tonsils have been removed, we can still work on the constipation when we address these other root layers. The other thing I want to mention is gallbladder removal. Many people have had their gallbladder removed. Again, one of those organs that you just don't need, right? Wrong. We need our gallbladder. If you're having gallbladder attacks, that's a symptom that your body's giving you. It's a message. If we ignore symptoms, or if we do something to suppress the symptom, like you have a cough, so you take Robitussin, children's cough syrup, right? That's going to suppress the cough. So if we suppress the symptom, what happens is that disease or that symptom, we should say, that pathology will go deeper into the body. The symptom is trying to prevent it from going deeper into the body, okay? So when we just put a blanket over the symptom or remove the gallbladder, if during gallbladder attacks, the pathology will go deeper into the body and it will then show up as something else. Gallbladder removal leads to colon cancer. Gallbladder removal leads to C. diff, recurring C. diff infections. Gallbladder removal leads to breast cancer. All of those cases, I've seen every single one of those cases in my practice. Gallbladder removal for this organ that we don't really need, big deal. No, we need the gallbladder. And before I go there, I really want you to understand this point that if your body is giving you a symptom, that's because it's trying to prevent the pathology from going deeper into your body. So we want to really address the symptom from a root cause. Gallbladder, let's say you're having a gallbladder attacks, gallbladder pains after you eat, radiating pain up into the right shoulder, right? Makes you kind of bend over, double over, taking a deep breath is painful, okay? These are some symptoms of a gallbladder attack. The standard approach is to remove the gallbladder, but we need the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a huge organ in terms of maintaining our circadian rhythms and our circadian biology. And that's because every single time we eat a meal, it releases bile. Bile's released to help break down the fats that we've just eaten, to help break down the foods that we've just eaten, okay? So if we take the gallbladder out, we're going to see pathology around the timing mechanisms of the body go awry. Circadian mismatch states are going to go awry. You're not going to be able to digest your food as well. You actually need bile in order to produce a bowel movement. Okay. So without bile and all those salts in the bile salts, right? You need this to produce a bowel movement. Now, there are ways to work with this if you've had your gallbladder removed. One of those is you have to eat at the same times of day. This is where meal timing is like super important. You have to eat at the same time every day to kind of trick your body into knowing, hey, the body's going to eat at this time, and this is when the digestive process starts. And then you have to take things like, certain bile acids during the meal to help support the process. So gallbladder removal is one of the most common overlooked causes of chronic constipation. And so if we want to get to the root of chronic constipation, yes, we have to do things around meal timing and bile salts and that sort of thing into the diet, but also we need to look at why was the gallbladder going into spasm in the first place? Why was it going into attack in the first place? Because now you're constipated and you likely have had some other side effects from the gallbladder removal, whether it was a chronic condition like cancer, a reoccurring infection like C. diff, or if it was something like now you have trouble losing weight. It can look in all these different ways depending on your constitution. So we really have to address what was happening before the gallbladder came out, okay? We can apply the same to the tonsillectomy and the appendectomy as well. Last but not least, number 5, constitution. So it always comes back to constitution. What is your constitution? So some things that I see around constitution when it comes to constipation is a constitutional dryness. Maybe there's a constitutional just propensity to a heightened nervous system, always in this fight or flight state. Also, somebody could be in this deep state of grief, or since they experienced an intense grief, they've been more constipated because they've internalized the grief and haven't expressed it. This could be around any trauma, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, etc. To end the show today, I'm going to talk about, just lastly here, one case study that I have just recently did. And this kind of actually inspired me to share this episode with you all today because this case has been really interesting and eye-opening. It's a chronic constipation case that came into my practice, and I want to share it with you all. And the intent around sharing this with you all is to help you look at constipation, chronic constipation states from a deeper core root place. You'll see, and hopefully you're seeing, because I'm going into some really big detail here, that constipation, chronically anyway, has very little to do with fruits, vegetables, fiber, and probiotics, okay? So I'm going to give you an example here. And just to preface, this case is unique to this individual. So after you've heard this case, I don't want you to think, oh, that's the reason why I'm constipated, because everybody who struggles with chronic constipation has it for a reason unique to them. This number 5 here, constitution, when I tell you this case study and share it with you, I hope that it gives you an overview as to how important of a role constitution plays in not only chronic constipation states, but getting to the root of literally any chronic health condition. So this is a case of constitutional dryness that has led to a lifelong experience of constipation. And so when the client who came into my practice addressed the constitutional dryness, and I'm going to note here, we're just getting started on this case. So it's still unfolding. And I'll be very excited to continue to report how it goes with you all. But she came into my practice and it was apparent this was a case of constitutional dryness. And so as we've addressed the constitutional dryness, we can see her body starting to rehydrate again. And I'm just going to go into the case here a little bit so you can get an idea as to, oh, this constipation thing might be way deeper than I ever imagined. So the client came into my practice, chronic constipation for over 30 years. And she tried everything: more fiber, more vegetables, magnesium, coffee enemas, water enemas, castor oil packs, GAPS diet, literally every diet, elimination diet. She named every diet I had ever heard of, and nothing came near touching the constipation or helping her overcome it. And so this was a really intense experience with constipation. Literally, this individual had no urge ever to go to the bathroom, and basically now relies on coffee enemas to get the stool out. When I'm talking to a new client, I really want to know about their case history. And so I'm specifically and especially concerned with the case history on the mother's side, because we inherit the mother's mitochondrial DNA. We inherit it from the maternal line. And so it was really interesting because she revealed that her maternal grandmother, her mother's mother, died of Alzheimer's and had also lifelong constipation. And at the end of her grandma's life, this client told me the story. It was really something to just hear this story. But the client recalled her grandmother not being able to pass stool, especially the more and more compromised her health become, and the more progressive and meaning worse her memory got really bad. Her memory literally moved into this state of paralysis with her mind, into the Alzheimer's state. And her grandma was doing all sorts of weird things memory-wise, just because she was losing her memory. And this is a very indicative sign when you have this combination of forgetfulness, even memory issues, to, complete absent-mindedness, the whole gamut, the whole spectrum here, paired with chronic constipation. These are signs of a chronic dryness, a constitutional dryness. And the client shared also that she too, experienced clumsiness, not her grandma, but herself experienced clumsiness, forgetfulness. She was forgetful for her age. She didn't think she should be that forgetful for how old she was and her chronic constipation state. And I said, well, this sounds like a very, very genetically passed on condition that you're experiencing. And this was a classic case of genetic induced constipation, I suspect, from my perspective. And we can see this in the scientific world in terms of our mitochondrial DNA. And for anyone interested in mitochondrial DNA, you can look at the work of Dr. Doug Wallace. He is amazing with regard to mitochondrial health, mitochondrial DNA. He's one of the only people in the science world looking in the direction of the mitochondria, which would do all the scientists a lot more good, and the people reading the science studies and relying on them a lot more good if they look in this direction. But really, I'm mentioning this because mitochondrial DNA, it's a different form of DNA than our genetic DNA, our nuclear DNA, which, is why you might look like your mom or look like your dad. That's related to just the DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is the energy battery that you inherit, and you only inherit this energy battery, your mitochondrial function, your energy production capabilities, through the maternal gene line. So this is why I pay a lot of attention to the maternal gene line. When somebody comes into my practice, I want to know what your mom's mom, etc., has experienced health-wise, because it'll tell me a lot about you and the engines, the battery, the energy production capabilities that you also have inherited. And if these are faulty, it doesn't mean you have bad luck and there's no hope for you. We work with those. Now, in homeopathic terms, this would be considered a genetic disease, a genetic pathology rooted in a dryness, this constitutional dryness. The mucous membranes of the rectum are so dry, she cannot pass stool. She literally can't pass stool without an enema. Even when, this is why I mentioned the whole water thing, because this client drinks a lot of water, still dry. Constitutional dryness, you can eat all the moistening foods in the world and drink as much water as you can. You will not overcome a constitutional dryness. It's like this dryness on this very deep genetic level that can't be overcome with something like dates and congee and slippery elm and water. You have to get into these genetic predispositions in order to overcome something like a constitutional dryness of this spectrum. So gave her the remedy, and what started to happen? So the first 3 days, the client had a headache, rashes, and her eyes were constantly watering. This was a really good sign to me, because when you give homeopathy, if it's a correct remedy, you're going to get some sort of aggravation in the beginning, especially if it's for a chronic condition. So, and these things, the aggravations, they don't last a long time. It's a symptom being healed. It's a level of pathology. It's coming to a new layer. It's healing that layer of pathology. So we can see that now the memory issues is going more to this headache state. So memory issues, forgetfulness that this client had, now she has headaches. The headaches is a much more surface layer than a memory issue, which is a much deeper layer. So this was a very good sign. When she said, hey, I'm having headaches, I said, that's good. Okay, that's a good sign. The rashes are telling me that something is coming out of the body. Toxins are coming out. There's a layer coming out. It's always good when things are coming out of the skin. It's a sign that there's healing going on in the body. Now, the eyes constantly watering, this was a good sign to me, because the individual had reported red eyes, dry eyes, always having to rub the eyes and blink the eyes because they're so dry she couldn't get them moist. All of these were signs to me that the body, the mucous membranes are starting to rehydrate themselves. These were all very, very good signs. Now I'm going to have to keep you posted, because literally I just did this case this week, and I wanted to share it with you all because so many people struggle with chronic constipation, and they try the standard things. They do the Metamucils, they do the powders, they do the fiber supplements and the magnesium, but they're not getting to the root cause of chronic constipation. And it's not about probiotics, vegetables, water intake, or movement, typically when it comes to chronic constipation states. I'm excited to keep you posted on this case. I'm hopeful because it was a very good sign so far that this patient's having with her reaction to the remedy. I'm going to keep you posted because I suspect within 30 to 60 days, this individual, especially with these initial signs, should see some really new and positive movement in the bowels, especially because we have her on the Sunlight RX now. So I'll keep you posted. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it helped you see with new eyes the state, the degree, the layers at which we have to address when it comes to truly overcoming chronic constipation. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much to all of you who tuned into the episode today, all about overcoming chronic constipation struggles. If you're someone who struggles with constipation and you've tried all the standard recommendations on how to get more regular with no long-term success, you're likely bumping up against at least one of the root causes I discussed and outlined today. And I hope this episode helped to bring new insight, clarity, and perspective as to how you can approach chronic constipation states from a radical health perspective to help bring you lasting relief and regularity. For those of you who enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to post a 5-star review with your comments and support. This is such an amazing way to fuel and motivate my continued podcasting and sharing via this platform. And it's a really awesome way to help spread the word to others searching for deeper answers and insights around their health. I thank you so much for that support. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at sunlight_RX or on Facebook, Heather Shepherd, and visit me on my site, heathershepherd.com, where my metabolic reset course, recipes, and cookbook info are all located. Keep up the awesome healing work, everyone, and we'll see you next week. The Primal Pioneer podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease in the Western medical sense or terms. It is to be used for educational and informational purposes only. The information shared on this podcast and all of Heather Shepherd's work is not a form of diagnostic medicine, nor is it a medical treatment. Heather Shepherd is a health educator, radical health practitioner, and a trained EMF specialist. And although she has a bachelor's in science and master's education in alternative medicine, she is not a medical doctor and does not give medical advice. Her work and sharing is to be used for informational and educational purposes only.